January 7, 1961. A cold, damp Saturday in London. Outside the Old Vic Theatre, the streets are packed with people seeking an evening of culture. Among them is a middle-aged couple, looking like ordinary tourists from the countryside. They meet a well-dressed man in a trench coat. After a few shared words, the man takes a simple wicker shopping bag from the woman's hand. It looks like a gentlemanly gesture, but in the world of shadows, it's a handoff. Inside that bag isn't groceries. It holds the blueprints for Britain's first nuclear submarine and secrets to NATO's underwater warfare, the crown jewels of the Royal Navy. Suddenly, the crowd becomes a net. Men in suits spring from doorways. As they are bundled into black cars, none realize that 5 miles away, in a quiet suburban bungalow, a radio is already warming up to tell Moscow the game is over. This is the story of the Portland spy ring, the neighbors next door who almost sank the British Navy. Let's unseal the file. To their neighbors, they were Peter and Helen Kroger. They lived in a modest bungalow in Ruislip, a quiet London suburb. Peter was a scholarly bookseller who loved cricket. Helen was a gregarious housewife who baked for everyone. They were the kind of people you'd trust with your spare house keys. But the Krogers were a lie. They weren't New Zealanders. They were Morris and Lona Cohen, deep-cover KGB illegals from New York City. Already legends in the Soviet Union, they had helped steal atomic secrets from the Manhattan Project years earlier. Now, their bungalow was a fortress of secrets. Behind bookshelves and under floorboards lay high-powered radio transmitters capable of reaching Moscow in seconds. They had darkrooms for microdot photography and hidden compartments in everyday items like lighters. But they needed an insider to steal the secrets. They found Harry Houghton, a clerk at the Admiralty underwater weapons establishment in Portland. Harry was a former Royal Navy man with a grudge, a drinking problem, and a desperate need for cash. He wasn't alone. His mistress, Ethel Gee, was a filing clerk at the same base with access to the most sensitive documents in the building. Together, they formed a lethal combination, the greedy traitor and the woman who would do anything for love. Harry Houghton was built on resentment. While working in Warsaw in the early 1950s, he was seduced by the easy money of the black market. Polish intelligence trapped and compromised him, turning him into a spy. When he returned to England and landed a job at the Portland Naval Base, the KGB didn't let go. They handed him to their best handler. By day, Harry was a boring clerk. By night, he was Shah, his KGB codename. Monthly, he traveled to London to meet his handler, Alec, in crowded cinemas or cafes. Alec handed over hundreds in cash, and Harry handed over rolls of film. But Harry was sloppy. He drank heavily and bought expensive cars and furniture on a meager salary. His ex-wife, Alice, noticed and warned the Admiralty 3 times that her husband was a spy. They dismissed her as a jealous wife, allowing the ring to operate for 4 more years because they couldn't imagine a common clerk being a mastermind. Alec was actually Gordon Lonsdale, real name Kanan Maladi, a high-ranking KGB officer. Lonsdale was the perfect spy, charming, wealthy, and successful. He ran a jukebox leasing business as a cover to travel and meet superiors. He was the bridge between Portland and the Ruislip bungalow. Lonsdale collected films from Harry and Ethel and drove them to the Krogers. They transformed the documents into microdots. Photographs shrunk to the size of a period. A single book sent to Europe could contain hundreds of pages of technical specs. Lonsdale felt invincible, living the high life in London, unaware that a letter at the CIA would change everything. The tip-off came from sniper Michael Goleniewski, a Polish officer working for the CIA. He warned of a mole in the Royal Navy who had worked in Warsaw. MI5 launched Operation Hard Rock and began watching Harry Houghton. They saw the spending and the mistress. Ethel Gee was his accomplice. She had top secret clearance and walked out of the base with blueprints for the HMS Dreadnought in her handbag. Surveillance teams, known as Watchers, followed the couple to London. They watched the meeting with the man in the trench coat and followed him back to the Ruislip bungalow. The net was being woven. As MI5 investigated the Krogers, the FBI identified them as Morris and Lona Cohen, the holy grail of Soviet espionage. Key couriers for the Rosenbergs, they had vanished from New York in 1950. The KGB had recycled them with new identities in the London suburbs. Their bungalow was a high-tech hub. Their signals were so powerful they interfered with neighbors' televisions. While the neighbors watched the news, the Cohens were busy changing the Cold War. By January 1961, Mi-5 New Goliath was about to defect. They had to move fast before the KGB realized the ring was compromised. They set the date for the next handoff, Saturday, January 7th. On the day of the arrest, undercover agents swarmed the Old Vic. They watched the bag move from Ethel to Lonsdale. Superintendent George Smith stepped forward, tapped Lonsdale's shoulder, and said, "I am a police officer, and I am arresting you." Lonsdale just smiled. He knew the game. Meanwhile, officers raided the Ruislip bungalow. Helen Kroger, in her dressing gown, tried to destroy evidence in the kitchen furnace. She reached into her handbag for microdots and signal codes, but a detective tackled her. A 5-day search revealed the impossible. A radio transmitter under the kitchen floor, microdots in book spines, and thousands in cash in a bathroom cistern. The shopping bag from the Old Vic contained 212 pages of technical drawings. Had it reached Ruislip, the Soviets would have had the blueprints for Britain's entire nuclear submarine fleet by Monday. The ring had been catastrophic. The trial was a sensation. Gordon Lonsdale refused to give his real name and received 25 years. The Krogers got 20 years, while Harry and Ethel were given 15. In 1964, Lonsdale was exchanged in a spy swap and returned to Moscow a hero, only to die 6 years later under mysterious circumstances. The Krogers were swapped in 1969 and honored in Russia with their faces on postage stamps. Harry and Ethel served their time in separate prisons, writing to each other weekly. Released in 1970, they married and lived out their lives in a small cottage. Two old people who once held the world's fate in a wicker bag. Was it worth it? Harry wanted money. The Krogers wanted ideology. Ethel claimed it was for love. What would you do if the person you loved asked you to betray your country? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this story, help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to Unsealed Mysteries for more thrilling stories. Until next time.